The day Kai made his discovery began like any other. The cold hum of the space station's engines reverberated through the metal walls, and the distant stars twinkled outside the observation windows. Kai wasn't a soldier, nor a politician. He was a systems engineer, one of many working on the small remote station orbiting a forgotten planet at the edge of human-controlled space. His job was to maintain the station's array of communication and defense systems, but he had never anticipated the turn his life would take that day. The device had been buried in the depths of an old storage vault, a relic of some long-forgotten alien species. It was an intricate array of crystalline structures, pulsing faintly with an otherworldly energy. At first, Kai thought it was just another piece of debris, but a strange feeling washed over him as he approached it. His curiosity got the better of him, and he began to tinker with the device, not knowing that every adjustment would alter the fate of the galaxy. As his fingers brushed against the device's surface, a violent pulse shot through the station. A cascade of lights flickered on every screen, and for a moment, Kai felt as if the entire station had come alive. The crystalline object responded to his touch, unleashing a wave of energy that surged outward, disrupting the station's systems. Before Kai could fully comprehend what had happened, alarms blared throughout the station. His heart raced as he scanned the monitors and saw something he never expected. An enormous fleet of alien ships was on its way, approaching at rapid speed. The HFY Empire, one of the most fearsome and ruthless military forces in the galaxy, had detected the surge in energy. Kai's mind raced. He didn't know how the device worked, but he understood enough to know it could be the key to humanity's survival, or its destruction. As the fleet drew closer, the reality of the situation began to sink in. There was no way the station could withstand the full might of the HFY, and if they got their hands on the device, it would be the end of any hope for human independence in the galaxy. In a desperate move, Kai activated the device once more. A surge of power erupted, and the station's systems, now linked to the alien technology, fired off a devastating blast of energy that disabled several enemy ships. The HFY fleet faltered, retreating temporarily, but the damage had been done. Kai had made an enemy of the galaxy's most feared empire, and humanity's role in the larger galactic drama was about to change forever. As the wreckage of the HFY fleet drifted in the cold void, Kai stood alone on the station's bridge, staring out at the stars. For the first time, humanity wasn't just an afterthought in the universe. It had just become a force to be reckoned with. News of Kai's discovery and the ensuing battle spread like wildfire across the galaxy. From the crumbling archives of distant alien civilizations to the halls of Earth's most powerful governments, the word was clear. Humanity had just made a bold statement. The HFY Empire, despite its power, had been struck by a species they had long written off as primitive and insignificant. In the aftermath, Earth's leaders convened in secrecy, knowing that this was no ordinary event. They had just made their mark on the galactic stage, and the consequences were unknown. The Intergalactic Council, the collective body of the universe's oldest and most influential species, was already discussing how to handle the emerging threat of humanity. They were not just concerned about the use of advanced alien technology in the hands of an unpredictable species, but also about the audacity of humans to challenge the established order. A diplomatic envoy was dispatched immediately. The council chose Xenir, an imposing figure, one of the X-Star, a race known for their intellect, composure, and above all, their ability to persuade. Xenir was tasked with containing humanity before it could become a real threat to the status quo. When Xenir arrived on Earth, he was not met with awe or fear, but with careful scrutiny. Humanity, still raw from their near defeat of the HFY, was not eager to submit to another authority. They were at a crossroads, their position of power precarious, but Xenir was convinced he could convince them. His proposition was simple: join the Galactic Council, share knowledge and resources, and humanity would be guaranteed a place among the stars. However, it came with a heavy price: the price of submission. The price of obedience. Xander's proposal was laid out in an ornate chamber on Earth, the weight of millennia of intergalactic diplomacy hanging in the air. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had long seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "You may have struck a blow against the HFY," he began, his voice smooth and persuasive, "but you are still fledglings in the vastness of the universe. Join us, and you will be spared the fate of the many species who thought themselves invincible." But the response was not one of meek submission. President Lyle, an astute leader who had been briefed on the full scope of the HFY's strength, stood firm. "We didn't ask for your help," he replied, his voice strong. "We didn't ask for your permission. Humanity doesn't bow to anyone." The room was charged with tension. Xander's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no warmth behind it. "You'll regret this," he said, his words dripping with a cold promise. "There are consequences for defying the council." As the doors to the chamber closed behind him, Xander knew one thing for certain. Humanity had just signed its own death sentence, or perhaps it had begun its rise to true power. Back on Earth, the message was clear. Humanity would not submit. The council had underestimated them. Now, humanity was going to have to fight for its survival and its place in the galaxy. The true test of their will was only just beginning. Humanity's defiance did not go unnoticed. The Galactic Council, initially confident that Xander's words would subdue the humans, found themselves facing a far more dangerous opponent than anticipated. Xander returned to his people with grim news. Earth had rejected the Council's offer, and humanity was not as weak as they had presumed. A series of covert operations were launched, and a unified fleet of the galaxy's most powerful forces gathered, intent on quashing the human threat before it could grow any stronger. The HFY Empire, driven by their unyielding desire for dominance, saw this as the perfect opportunity to wipe out the humans and reassert their control. But they weren't the only ones. The HFY, too, saw humanity as a dangerous anomaly, an unpredictable variable in their perfectly balanced universe. The attack came swiftly. Humanity's capital fleet, which had barely begun to form, was quickly thrown into its first major conflict. A surprise assault on Earth itself, an overwhelming show of force, was launched, a coordinated strike by the HFY and the HFY. They aimed to bombard the planet into submission, to erase the stain of human resistance from the galaxy's history. But what the aliens didn't understand was that humanity was not just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its future. The humans were desperate, yes, but they were also resilient, resourceful, and above all, unwilling to bow down. The human fleet, led by Admiral Verna, a seasoned commander who had seen the brutality of galactic warfare firsthand, responded with a vengeance. Her fleet, though small, was agile and determined, filled with soldiers and engineers who were willing to do whatever it took to survive. The first battle was a chaotic storm of laser fire and ion blasts, but it was a battle humanity would not lose. Kai, now working with Admiral Verna and a crack team of engineers, was at the heart of the conflict. His knowledge of the alien device was instrumental in countering the overwhelming firepower of the invaders. The device he'd activated on the space station, a quantum manipulator, had the power to distort energy fields and disable enemy weapon systems, a game-changer in the hands of the humans. In the midst of the battle, Kai used the device to cripple the advanced HFY flagship, turning the tide in an unexpected victory. The alien forces, stunned by the effectiveness of humanity's new weapon, were forced to retreat. For the first time in galactic history, an empire known for its ruthlessness and unyielding power had been pushed back by a species once thought to be inferior. The implications of this victory were enormous. Humanity had not only survived, it had made a statement. The galaxy was not going to be the same again. But the war was far from over. In the shadows, the Council, angered by the loss of face, began to move in ways even more dangerous than before, and humanity's greatest trial was just beginning. The galaxy, which had once seen humans as insignificant, now saw them as a growing threat, one that could no longer be ignored. The victory over the HFY was a turning point, but it was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. The Galactic Council, humiliated and furious, saw the rise of humanity as an existential threat to their centuries-old dominance. Their once confident belief in their invulnerability began to erode, replaced with an all-consuming desire to extinguish this rebellious species before it grew too powerful. Xanir, still reeling from the failure of his diplomatic mission, was summoned back to the council to answer for the human defiance. He did not arrive with apologies, but with a dark resolve. The humans must be eliminated, he insisted, his cold eyes burning with determination. They will never fall into our control willingly, and that makes them dangerous. The council agreed. The Xthar, long known for their intellectual prowess, provided strategies to dismantle humanity's newfound strength. The Telleri, a race of master tacticians, would train the forces of the council in combat against the unpredictable humans. Even the Jakar, a race with a deep spiritual connection to the stars, were drawn into the fray, their warriors ready to crush what they saw as an abomination against the natural order. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity's leaders were not unaware of the growing storm. Admiral Verna, now appointed as the head of Earth's unified fleet, began preparations for what would be the defining struggle of humanity's existence. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was the cradle of a rising empire. But internal divisions began to surface as well. As more worlds fell under human control, questions arose. Were they becoming like the empires they had so despised? Were they losing their humanity in the pursuit of power? The war escalated rapidly. The combined forces of the Council launched an all-out assault on Earth's defenses, beginning with devastating strikes on human colonies across the galaxy. Entire fleets of human ships were ambushed, outnumbered, and destroyed in brutal surprise attacks. The HFY led the charge, their fleets arriving with crushing force, followed closely by the Xthar's highly advanced warships. Humanity, despite its earlier victories, found itself overwhelmed and unprepared for the full might of the Council. Kai, now a commander in the field, found himself facing the grim reality of war. As Earth's defenses crumbled under the weight of the enemy onslaught, Kai made a fateful decision. He activated the quantum device once again, this time more dangerously than ever before. The energy surge it unleashed was chaotic, strange, and unpredictable, but it gave the humans a much-needed edge. The device disrupted the cohesion of the enemy fleets, causing a temporary blackout of their systems. In the confusion, humanity's fleet launched a surprise counterattack, striking with ferocity and precision. The Council forces were caught off guard, but the victory came at a heavy price. The device had drained Kai's own life force, and as the battle ended, he collapsed, barely clinging to life. Though humanity had won another battle, the cost was high. The galaxy, now fully aware of the threat humanity posed, would never look at them the same way again. The Council, stunned by the resilience of the humans, vowed to stop at nothing to crush them. Humanity's survival was no longer certain. It was now a matter of life or death. The human victory against the combined might of the Galactic Council was nothing short of miraculous. Yet, as the dust settled, humanity faced a new, more daunting challenge. The Council, though momentarily stunned, had not been defeated. They had only been forced into a temporary retreat, licking their wounds and regrouping their forces. Humanity, on the other hand, was emboldened. Their victory had brought them newfound confidence, and in the wake of the battle, the decision was made. Humanity would no longer be a passive player in the galaxy's grand game. The war machine, once a makeshift coalition of desperate humans, began to form into a well-oiled empire. With Kay's discovery of the alien quantum device and Admiral Verna's tactical brilliance, humanity's forces were able to push beyond Earth's borders. They swiftly moved to conquer neighboring star systems, seizing strategic locations and resources. Each victory, no matter how hard won, made humanity's presence in the galaxy undeniable. But the expansion wasn't just military. A new political ideology began to take root within the human empire, an ideal born from their struggle for survival. Some leaders, like President Lyle, called for a new order, a galaxy where all species could coexist under human rule, governed by the principles of freedom, self-determination, and mutual respect. But others, particularly among the military ranks, saw this as an opportunity for ruthless expansion, a chance to impose human dominance on the galaxy once and for all. As humanity moved from one system to the next, the sheer speed of their expansion became a source of concern for the remaining galactic empires. The Xthar, known for their quiet wisdom and subtlety, watched warily from their hidden strongholds. The Chikar, whose spiritual connection to the stars gave them great power in combat, found themselves uneasy about the growing human influence. Even the HFY, still licking their wounds after the battles near Earth, began to regroup, preparing for their inevitable return. Among the many new worlds under human control, the once enslaved species found themselves caught between hope and fear. Some saw the rise of humanity as a beacon of freedom, a chance to break free from the tyrannical rule of the Council. Others, however, feared that humans, like the empires before them, would become just another imperial force, bent on domination rather than equality. On the capital world of New Sol, where humanity's central government now resided, debates raged. Kai, still recovering from the near-fatal use of the quantum device, was caught in the middle. He had become a hero to many, but the toll of war and the device's cost weighed heavily on his soul. He began to question whether the galaxy truly needed another empire, or if humanity could carve out a future based on cooperation and peace. But the reality was harsh. Humanity's power was growing, and the galaxy would not sit idle. The next phase of the war was already underway, and Kai knew that, whether humanity liked it or not, the galaxy would soon decide what role they would play in the future. As humanity's influence spread, the galaxy began to divide into two distinct factions. On one side were the established powers, the Xthar, Chikar, and the remnants of the HFY Empire, whose pride had been deeply wounded by their earlier defeats. On the other side stood humanity, now recognized as a formidable force in galactic politics. These former underdogs were no longer seen as pawns in the Council's game, but as players in their own right. And yet, despite their growing power, humanity was not unified. The ideological rifts within the human empire deepened. President Lyle, still the leader of the human government, remained committed to his vision of a galaxy where species could coexist under a human-led federation. He believed that humanity's rapid expansion should be tempered by diplomacy and mutual understanding. But his vision was increasingly challenged by the more hawkish factions within the military and the government, particularly those led by Admiral Verna, who saw any form of peace as naive. The human military, now brimming with pride after their victories, wanted to push further, to dominate, and to destroy the Council once and for all. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council, desperate to maintain its hegemony, began to unite under a common banner. The Xthar, once cautious, threw their full support behind a new military alliance, their leaders determined to end humanity's rise and preserve the status quo. The HFY, bitter and humiliated, but still immensely powerful, rearmed their fleets and began covert operations to destabilize humanity's new territories. Even the Chikar, those spiritual guardians of the stars, began to mobilize their ancient warriors, sensing the imminent danger humanity posed to the balance of the galaxy. In the midst of this brewing conflict, Kai remained a figure of both admiration and suspicion. The quantum device he had discovered had become a symbol of humanity's power, but its volatile nature made many uneasy. Though it had won humanity key battles, the device was also unpredictable, and its toll on Kai had become painfully clear. He had given too much of himself to the device, his health deteriorating rapidly after each use. Some whispered that he had become little more than a tool of war, a living weapon at the mercy of an alien technology that could one day consume him entirely. In his private moments, Kai struggled with the weight of his role. He was a hero, yes, but also a pawn in a game much larger than himself. He had no illusions about the future. The galaxy would never accept humanity as an equal power without resistance, and the Council would stop at nothing to restore their dominance, even if it meant annihilating humanity. The countdown to war had begun. On the capital world of New Sol, President Lyle and Admiral Vernick clashed over the future of humanity's expansion. While Lyle still clung to his hope for peace, Verna was preparing for the inevitable conflict. Soon, both sides would be forced to choose: fight for survival or face extinction. The storm was gathering, and no one, not even the humans themselves, knew if they could weather it. The galaxy stood on the brink of annihilation. Humanity's rise had upset the delicate balance of power, and the once unified Galactic Council now fractured into factions, each bent on either suppressing or obliterating the human threat. Despite the mounting pressure, President Lyle held firm to his belief that peace could be achieved. He sought out diplomatic channels, secretly reaching out to alien leaders in an attempt to forge alliances. But his efforts seemed increasingly futile as the war drums grew louder. Admiral Verna, the military's most respected strategist, saw the situation differently. She had witnessed the ferocity of humanity's enemies firsthand and believed that the Council would never accept peace. To them, humanity was a challenge to their superiority, something that could not be tolerated. Verna's faction grew more powerful, pushing for a full-scale war with the capital planet, New Sol, as the epicenter of the conflict. She knew that if humanity was to have any hope of survival, they would need to strike first. As tensions reached a boiling point, the Galactic Council's forces made their move. A vast armada, composed of the Ashuk, Tithar, and Jakar, descended upon New Sol with terrifying speed. The invasion was swift and brutal, their ships appearing on the outer rim of human-controlled space with little warning. The full weight of the Council's military might crash down upon the planet, unleashing wave after wave of destruction. At the forefront of the battle was Kai, though now in a weakened state. His health, already frail from his previous use of the alien device, had deteriorated further. Yet, the desperation of the situation forced him to activate the quantum device once more. The energy it emitted was unstable, crackling through the atmosphere like a cosmic storm. But this time, it was different. The device seemed to resonate with something far older, something beyond even the scope of its creators. The moment the device powered up, a violent shockwave tore through space. The fabric of reality itself seemed to warp as Kai's weakened form connected with the alien technology in ways no one had predicted. Ships across the invading fleet lost their energy shields, weapons systems malfunctioned, and many vessels were torn apart by the device's raw, unpredictable power. For a fleeting moment, humanity's forces regained the upper hand. But the victory was short-lived. The Council had anticipated humanity's reliance on the quantum device, and they had prepared their own countermeasure. A hidden fleet of stealth ships, powered by an ancient technology of their own, infiltrated the human defenses. These ships carried a powerful weapon, an energy dampener capable of neutralizing the quantum device's effects. As the first wave of Council forces retreated, the dampener was deployed on New Sol. The results were immediate. The quantum device's power fizzled out, and the battlefield returned to chaos. Humanity's fleet, now vulnerable, was forced to retreat in disarray, abandoning much of their hard-won territory. The siege of New Sol was a crushing blow to humanity's dreams of expansion. The victory of the Council was not just tactical, it was symbolic. Humanity, for the first time since their rise to power, was on the defensive. The war was far from over, but now, the future of human independence hung in the balance. In the aftermath of the siege of New Sol, humanity was shaken to its core. The Council had dealt them a devastating blow, and the loss of New Sol, their capital, the heart of their empire, was a cruel reminder that even the most extraordinary victories could be undone in a moment. For the first time, Humanity faced the reality of its vulnerability. They had overestimated their strength and underestimated the resolve of their enemies. The Council had grown wiser, their strategies more cunning, and humanity now found itself in a precarious position. But Admiral Verna was not one to surrender easily. She knew that the battle for humanity's future was far from lost. If anything, it had become even more critical. As the remnants of Earth's military regrouped on distant planets, Verna called for a rallying of all human forces. This would be humanity's final stand. Kai, weakened and frail from his last use of the quantum device, knew he could no longer rely on its power. The device, once a symbol of hope, had become a ticking time bomb. Its energy too unpredictable, its toll too great. But even as his health deteriorated, he refused to back down. His connection to the alien technology had shown him something. An understanding. A glimpse into the potential for humanity to evolve beyond its dependence on mere power. There was a different way, one that didn't require domination or subjugation. If humanity could harness this knowledge, they could build a future where they no longer had to fight for survival. The human fleet, now a patchwork of ships from various worlds, prepared to face the Council once again. This time, it would not be a battle of mere technology or firepower. President Lyle, despite his earlier calls for peace, now understood the reality of the situation. The Council would never accept humanity as equals, and the galaxy would never know peace until they had been defeated. The time for diplomacy had passed. Humanity had to fight, but this time they would fight not just for survival, but for a future of their own making. The final confrontation took place on the ruins of New Sol. The once beautiful world had been scorched by the Council's relentless assault, and now it stood as the last battlefield between humanity and the galaxy's ancient powers. The sky above was darkened by the shadows of the Council's fleet, which encircled the planet, ready to crush the last remnants of human resistance. In the heart of the battle, Kai made his final decision. Using his deep understanding of the alien device, he managed to unlock its true potential. Instead of using it as a weapon, he reconfigured the device to channel its energy not as a destructive force, but as a beacon, a signal, a plea for unity. His plan was risky, but it was the only hope left for humanity. As the quantum device powered up one last time, Kai's fading consciousness saw something incredible. His signal had reached beyond the Council's reach. It was not just the old empires who were watching, but new, unaligned species from the farthest corners of the galaxy. It was a message of resilience, of strength in unity, and most importantly, of the hope that a better future was possible. The outcome of the battle was unclear, but humanity had already won the most important victory. It had shown the galaxy that it would never back down, no matter the odds. And in that moment, the galaxy began to shift. The Council, once unchallenged, would never be the same again.